Hello, welcome to another episode of the Property Lifestyle Mastery Podcast. I'm Jackie Tomes, and we are all about freedom on this show. How you create a property portfolio that creates genuine freedom in all of its forms. And a really important thing that we have found is how you find that balance along the way, find that trust and decide who you're listening to, whose opinions you cut out, who you choose to listen to, what you let go, what you grab onto and what you take action on. We've learned so much about this along the way, and observing people that we mentor and seeing where they have specific successes and where some others struggle. This has really brought this conversation to the fore for us. So today's all about how you trust your gut and find the right balance between researching, listening and doing. And so it's Dom and Dave today. So let's do this.
Good morning, Dave.
Morning, Dom.
Hello. So today's topic, who to listen to. This is an interesting one because the initial thought would be other people. Who do I listen to? Who out of the other people in my life do I listen to? And actually also, what does that listening mean? Am I embodying it? Am I taking it on? Am I being influenced by it? Am I listening to myself? Am I listening to my in-laws? Am I listening to the news? There's so many things that we, people and others that we could be listening to. But yeah, what are your thoughts on where to start with this one?
I guess I just want to outline for a start, like what we mean by listening to. And I guess I'd say that, like, we're always hearing the world around us. We're hearing people say things, and everything that comes towards us from someone else, whatever source it's from, is something that is in one way, we're either going to somehow accept it in some form or another, or we're going to reject it in some way or another. We either see it as a conflict to our current beliefs, or we're going to, in some way, take it on into our current beliefs, and then it becomes part of our way of thinking slightly. Now, even that's often happening, or nearly always happening, on a subconscious level. You don't even realize it's happening. You're just constantly taking on information from all sorts of sources, and that's affecting you. That's affecting you in some way or another. So I guess I wanted to outline that when we talk about who are you listening to, it's two things. It's who are you consciously listening to and taking your advice from, and who are you choosing to have in your peripheral hearing, so you are subconsciously listening to them. Right. And when you put the two together, that kind of creates your environment of listening. Yeah. So where would you like to start, Dom? Would you want to start with the conscious choice of listening, or should we start down the route of kind of subconscious, peripheral, what are you hearing in the world?
Well, because this is a property lifestyle mastery, it's about mastering what you're allowing in, effectively. So I would say we've got to become conscious of the unconscious and deliberately craft our environment so that we are only effectively hearing and taking on information from the right sources, or not necessarily the right sources. Well, yeah, it is the right source. It's the right people and the right information, rather than effectively disempowering, energy draining information and news and other people that actually bring us down. Because everything in the world is actually made up of light and sound, and so everything affects us, and so we're kind of always, as you say, we're always listening, and therefore we need to be deliberate about who and what we listen to. So let's start with the subconscious.
Great. I think from a subconscious level, if we start talking about just the general things that people have on in the background, or like that people listening to this podcast, right? People are making the choice to listen to this podcast in their spare time. Hopefully people are choosing to do that because they buy into you and me and Jackie and the type of lifestyle we lead, hence the name of the podcast. And therefore the choice to listen to it is on the basis of the person who's saying it. Right. And you're kind of making a choice to have around you this noise that is coming from a direction of someone that you aspire to be like or inspired by, and that you want to kind of slowly just have that imbibing in and coming through. So I think, choosing to listen to a podcast from someone you're inspired by becomes a kind of positive, continual subconscious reinforcement that helps you. And on the other side of the scale, I think just on to finish that is like podcasts and making your choice to kind of have this listening of whatever you're doing, YouTube's, podcasts, whatever, around people, audiobooks as well, around people that you know are inspiring and you know that you want to be like them. And maybe we can cover that a bit more in detail later. But then the other side, I think, is the more interesting one, is the negative belief systems. We end up putting chatter on in the background. And I think a massive one is the news. You mentioned it as a passing comment straight away, because actually it's so vital that we're aware of this fact that news is something everyone has a subconscious belief is something they should be keeping track of.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, you should be keeping track of news because, and I've heard it so many times when I ask why are you doing this? Why do you listen to that? Why do you have the TV on in the background? Why? People are like, oh, I have to because it's, I just should keep track of what's going on in the world. I should keep track of what's happening, right? Like as if that's somehow like really important to their life decisions. And yet, we've got to bring this back to the basics. What is news? And what does that mean? Like, why are people choosing to put that news in front of you? And when you actually think about it, news is negativity.
Right.
Generally, 90% or even more of news is literally a choice to put a negative thing into the world because that's what sells, that's what people want to hear. So you end up listening to something that is pretty much just negative thing after negative thing after negative thing of this bad thing's happened, that bad thing is happening, that person's doing that bad thing. And you're like just filtering badness and negativity and it kind of really impacts your consciousness because your belief systems start to shift towards the belief that there is much more negative happening in the world than there really is because you're hearing so much more negative than positive. And so you start to fall down the wayside of a fear-based belief around the world because you start to see and hear, whenever you look at normal things in your world, you're filtering that belief system that there is more negative happening than not, and it starts to affect your decision making. Right. Because if all you've ever heard is that bad things are happening, then when you see things in your life, your immediate reaction is to think there's a possible bad thing that's going to happen there, right? Oh, well, a knock at the door. What's your very first belief around who's going to be behind that door? Is it going to be a lovely friendly person or is it going to be a potential threat? The more you listen to news about people breaking in and awful things happening to people being broken into in their houses, the more you're going to start to think, ooh, I better check who that is first. I better get a Ring doorbell so I can check who it is, or I better have the latch on. And the more you start to have a fear-based reaction, and that is happening everywhere in your life. Sorry, I've just gone on a massive rant.
Yes, massive rant.
Pass over to you.
So tip number one for the listeners is if you haven't already, absolutely cut out the news. It is just not necessary in your world, and you'll find your level of happiness and enjoyment and peace actually goes up because you're cutting out all that negativity. So I haven't been listening to the news for absolutely ages. One thing I do listen to is comedy shows, and that's how I get my news. The news quiz on a Friday evening at 6:30, or have I got news for you, and things like that. Occasionally, but even that I find it's like, wow, this is the state of the world at the moment. It's like almost being put off listening to those programs because of the news on there. But number one is cut out that. So cut out things that are going to hold you back and make you feel negative, because the mind is programmed to look for dangers. That's why we are kind of almost addicted to listening to the news and listening to negative information, because it's kind of a survival thing. If we know about the danger, then we're more likely to survive. If we miss the danger, then we're more likely to die. And so we'll miss an apple on a tree, but we'll spot the snake at the bottom of it, because our mind is, and our eyes and everything is programmed to look for the dangers. But we no longer live in that society. We don't need to look for the dangers and be worried about the dangers so much anymore. It's not about survival, it's about self-actualization. I believe that people who focus on becoming the best version of themselves, focus on the life that they do want, and then they're deliberate about who they listen to and what they put into their mind. And even listening to themselves, and being aware of their own mind chatter. Because the mind just goes on and on and on, and most people aren't even aware of how negative their self-talk is. So that there's that self-talk that is you're listening to. It's like you don't have to listen to all of your thoughts. You can let them go, and actually the more present you become and the more aware you become of your own self-talk, the bigger the impact on your own life, and the more you can train yourself to look for the positives. And when you look for the positives, things is an upward spiral. Actually, you see more stuff to be grateful for, more stuff to be happy about, and you're actually training yourself to live a better life, which is what we're all about. So there's me going on about now, but just a number of thoughts. But okay, so okay, we talked about not listening to the news. What about the people that almost you can't get away from? So family, potentially, parents, in-laws, mum and dad, those sorts of things. What should people do there?
Well, I think we've got to be super careful in this area. I'm aware, finishing up the news concept because it links to this. I do believe that there might, it's easy enough to keep track of what the happenings in the world without actually listening to news and actually imbibing that on a day-to-day basis. So, I do think there's something to be said for just like a very, very quick snapshot articles. If you have anything that's just like, oh, this has happened here, that's happened there. So you can just like take it in a 5-minute hit and that's it, you're done. So it's just see what's going on, see the changes, and that's all I do once a week. Very quick check, 5 minutes, and that means I'm not really being hit by all that negativity continuously for long periods of time.
Yes.
But I do just keep abreast of what's happening with the president in America or the elections or whatever, what's going on with the war in Ukraine. Just a quick check, just so I'm abreast, and that makes me feel good. I don't even think I need that. I literally go for time. Sometimes I've gone through times without doing that, and it doesn't impact my life in the slightest. I just suddenly find out about it from someone else. But it's just that my suggestion would be to just keep it short and simple, and that's what I would suggest for the family, because unless your family is someone who you are living the life you want, and most of us, we have broken away from the norm. Most of us are entrepreneurs breaking away from the norm, and unless you're very lucky to have had a family who had parents who actually did that previously and you really look up to them, aspire to be like them, most of us don't have that. We're actually breaking away from the family because they're following the standard model of life, the kind of sheep model of society that follows the standard way of thinking. We want to find a new way of thinking. So you've just got to be very careful, because we've grown up with these people and actually from a young age become indoctrinated into believing what they say to us, indoctrinated that their way of thinking is the right way of thinking for a very long time. And it's depending on who you are and your relationship with your family, it could be for you quite hard to keep reminding yourself that is an old way of thinking and you don't want to think that anymore, because every time you spend time with them, you're going to be hearing this perspective, this viewpoint that will reinforce old belief systems that might be holding you back, might be causing problems. Even that's just worries around so many people, I think, when they go into property, the family have so many worries about it, and like, but what if there's a crash? I'm just really worried about you. What if this happens? How are you dealing with that? Like, even just how they talk about property can kind of bring those worries to mind and fears to mind, and make you feel less empowered in your business and less able to step it up. And I've had clients where I've literally had sessions going, right, we're going to scale up now, we're ready to go, let's go, how many do you want to do? And they're like, I'm saying, do you want to start doing maybe one every 2 months or even one a month? What are we going to head for? And the response was, oh, I don't think I could do that. And I was like, but why? Surely, that's why you're here talking to me, because you want to scale up. It's time. And they're like, oh, and the answer was, because I'm already pushing the boundaries of what my family are comfortable with.
Right.
They already think I'm crazy doing what I'm doing. I don't think they'd be comfortable with me doing that much. It would be too much. And this wasn't just talking about his wife. It was not just like, because in most cases it'd be the wife you have to get convinced, the partner, a life partner you have to convince. He was literally talking about his entire family. And I was like, wow, I've just hit boom. I've hit the self-limiting family belief system right here, and he wouldn't scale up because of it, because of the family, and that was impacting him. And obviously his fears about scaling up are being maximized, what's the word, more of it's happening because he's got this family belief system as well. It's escalating it. Wow, it was amazing. I was just like, wow, that's someone who really needs to get away from what the family is saying and thinking and believing, and find his own voice.
So is there a time at which we realize and maybe become aware that actually no longer listening to potentially the parents, for example, because obviously as growing up we listen to parents, we do what they say to a certain extent, depending on the kids, and we listen to them, we look at them as authorities, our teachers as we're growing up in particular, and our parents. At what point do we then go, actually, what, I'm going to discern at this point actually whether or not their information or their advice is relevant to me? Is there a turning point? When does that happen, if at all? And yeah,
That's such a good question. I guess I've got two opinions on this because you can't tell an answer for sure because everyone's parents are different. So there's going to be a
right.
turning point based on your parents' kind of evolution and where they're
Yes.
at and how successful they are. Because like you can't say that if your parents super successful and is living the life you want to lead and is really amazing that
Yes.
you're going to want to listen to them till you're 40, 50 because it's good advice probably.
Or till you've basically gone past them is my thought. Is like,
Yes.
well, once they are no longer the experts in your area, your field, the thing that you want to get better at, then that's probably the right time to go, okay, I'll decide whether or not the information they're telling me is going to be worth acting on, or whether actually I should go to an actual, an expert in this field and
Mm.
get guidance from them instead.
But I think there's a different point here is apart from just expertise, which obviously that's one bit of advice we can get. I think the other problem, and I think this is a major factor, and it's actually moving me more into the conscious listening choices. Um, if your parents have spent your whole life, an earlier life, trying to craft you into who they want you to be,
Yes, yes,
right? And many parents do that. That feels like the normal parenting methodology is I know what's right for you. I feel like you should become this type of person. I'm going to make sure you follow that path, whatever that path might be.
yeah,
So if your parents have followed that path in life, you're going to sooner, I would say, hit a point at which they do not see you for who you are now.
yeah,
They do not see you for what your desires and wants are. And most importantly, they haven't heard or listened to you and your voice of where you're wanting to go with life. And
mm,
and it might be because you've never told them. It might be because you've never had those conversations with them because you don't with your parents. Quite a lot of people don't.
yeah,
But even if you have started to try and say things about yourself and where you're wanting to go and your dreams and your ambitions and what you like and don't like and what you're trying to do and trying not to do and your values,
yeah,
all of these things that are important to you and your journey in life, if they haven't listened to that, then their advice will be flawed. It
right,
will be flawed, and most importantly, it not just flawed, but they will believe from historical experience that their solution for you is better than your solution for you,
yes,
and they will try and undermine that and subvert it. Influence you and manipulate you in ways without even meaning to
yes,
towards their idea of what you should be doing. So I think it's a very careful thing with parents because you've got to be aware of this and you've got to know, have they heard me? Have they listened to my choices and my choice for what I want in life?
yes,
Are they hearing that before they advise, or are they just blocking that out and looking at a picture of what they want me to be and
yes.
advising on that?
Yeah, absolutely. It makes me think of actually people, are very rarely actually listening. They're always thinking about their opinion and what they want
Mm,
to then bash across to you, rather than really understanding your point of view or you understanding their point of view, to really create rapport and on a deeper level understanding. And I always remember, yeah, Stephen Covey wrote The Eighth Habit, and in chapter 10 there was a really good method for basically dissolving any problems or lack of communication around a particular thing. And number one was just listen without interrupting for fully until that person feels like they've said everything that they want to say. Then
mm,
repeat back to them what it is that you've heard so that they can see if you've understood it, well enough. And then you do the opposite. And then you agree that there's a better solution than what either of you have currently come up with, and that you work together to find that solution. And that was such a simple model, but so powerful for creating much better communication between people, and really learning to listen without effectively interrupting the whole time. Because as soon as you've had a thought, you're not really listening to the same level as someone who isn't thinking about what they want to say next, but they're just present and not, they're not waiting to respond. They're just embodying and really deeply listening to what you're saying.
so funny. That was amazing. Like, what a great methodology. I love that so much. And I'd never really thought about this idea that not one party ever has the answer. It's only with the two together
Yeah,
that you will come
that's
to
the best.
the best solution. And you're right. We've all been there, right? We've all been in a situation where we're talking to someone at some social event, and it's less fulfilling than it should be because the person's really just in their own head, kind of thinking something they want to say, but so they're not really listening to what you have to say.
Mhm.
And it's like you can kind of, sometimes you're more aware of it than others, but regardless of whether you are aware or not, it definitely dampens any satisfaction in that conversation because there's not a true connection happening. And bringing that back to, I'd say, a business setting and to your evolution in your business, I would say it's one of the biggest flaws of a mentor. If a
Right.
mentor comes at you with their advice before they've heard you talk,
Your story.
you know they're a bad mentor
Right.
straight away.
Yeah.
If they listen to you talk for a bit and then immediately just say, well, I know what the answer is, and then give you a load back, you again, you know you've got an average mentor, maybe not the best advice for sure. Maybe you're going to get the kind of their opinion of how the world works and how they build their business.
Yeah.
And they've kind of tried to listen to you in order to say, how do I fit my opinion onto your problem?
Yes.
And now you've got potentially someone's good solution shoehorned onto your problem. And so that's an average mentor. You might make it work, you might not, but either way, it's not going to be a perfect fit.
Yeah.
So a great mentor, someone who you really want to get fantastic advice from, is someone who really takes the time to hear everything you have to say, listen to your problems, your perspective, what it is that's driving you. Because like a solution might be different, like the same problem could be require two different solutions based on two different people. So it's not even just hearing the problem going, I know the solution to that. It's about hearing the problem plus the person's drivers, the reason they're struggling with it.
Yeah.
You know, if someone's struggling with time management, like there's not one solution to it, because time management has so many different drivers and issues underneath it. And so it requires a mentor to hear you and hear the problem, but then also hear why and ask lots of questions.
Exactly.
And if you're not being asked those questions, don't listen to the response, or at least take it with massive pinches of salt.
Yes.
Because it might not be relevant to you. It might not be right for you.
Yeah. So many people, because I've been working in the world of coaching and mentoring for 18 years now. And whenever someone wants to be a mentor for one of the organizations I work for, I always say, well, you've got to do a coaching qualification first, because it's about that ability to listen and the ability to ask questions to get to the heart of the problem before giving any advice or guidance. Because the other thing is, when you give advice or guidance, someone can just take it or leave it. Whereas if you help them understand, and they understand for themselves because they've spoken and expressed all the issues that they feel they have, then they come up and you help them to come up with their own solution. That's when they really own it, and they'll do something about it because they've come up with the idea, they've come up with the inspiration, the motivation, and that's when people really change. And that's why coaching, although a little bit slower than mentoring, and most people want the mentoring, they would want to be told what to do. The reality of it, as we know, because we've been in this world for a while too, is that most people don't always take the advice and guidance that we give them for various limiting reasons. And they almost become blind to it because they're still stuck in their own world. So it's human beings, and it's a balancing act, and it's listening carefully. But to really influence and help someone, we have to listen to them first, and then provide the right tailored guidance based on who they are and their resources available to them in terms of their limitations and other things. But
I guess it's interesting what you've said there about, kind of how what people are looking for. They want to have a mentor rather than a coach because they just want to be told what to do.
Yeah.
And I think this is a fundamental problem that is another limiting factor for most people. If you're ever in that position where you just want to be told what to do, it's partly because you have an underlying kind of belief system that follows the sheep mentality, the kind of herd mentality of just wanting to follow. But we can't run a successful business being a follower. So
Right.
you're gonna struggle all the time. So if you ever feel like that, then you've got a problem you're going to have to overcome inside. Because I think when you're dealing with any mentor, anyone you're listening to for advice, it should always come from you being a leader mentality.
Yes.
Not that you block them out, because you're not trying to block them out. You're trying to take on the advice and assimilate it with your own perspective in a way that you can then work with it, which is what you just said. If you feel like the answer comes from you, then you're more likely to be driven by it. Well, that should be the case for any advice you're taking on. It should be part of your belief system.
Yes.
So that you can follow it. And I think this issue of just following advice because it's coming from someone without actually realizing that you're a unique individual. You are the only one of you on the planet out of however many billions there are here, and every
Yes.
single individual has their own path and the own right actions for them. And no other person can ever tell you, ever, what the right path is for you. And then, going back to your point at the beginning, Dom, it's like it's a matter of learning to take in information, but then listen to yourself.
Yeah.
So you're not really listening to the outer world. You've got to work out how to take in the advice from the right sources, but then listen inwards and go, okay, but now this is me.
Yes.
How does this affect me and my dreams and my path, and what therefore do I want? And I think this is one of the massive problems with business model selection. So many people have their business model, whatever it is, buy to let, HMOs, rent to rent, and they've made a decision on that for one reason or another, but they haven't necessarily fully committed to it because of they've made it for their life. But then they have some other random property investor they go and talk to, not even necessarily a mentor, not even necessarily someone who's really successful. It'll just be another person who suddenly says, yeah, but you know what you should be doing? This is the best thing you should be doing. You should be doing HMOs with commercial leases. That's the model for nowadays. And you listen to them, and you kind of have this, and it like shakes your foundations, and you start
Yes.
thinking, oh, maybe I should consider that.
Yeah.
And it's because you're taking in information in the wrong way. You're not realizing that that is someone else's perspective, someone
Yeah.
else's life, and it's not
Yeah.
necessarily right for your life at all.
Right. And this makes me think of something I've been learning about recently called human design, which I know we've got a podcast coming up on it soon. But some people have what they call an open head center. So they're far more likely to be influenced by people because they're open. They're more open to other ideas, other people's influence. And then there are other people, like my youngest son, Robin, who's 6, and my dad, and my cousin, and
Dom's family, everyone.
they have a defined head center, and they will not. I mean, they know their mind, and they will not take on your opinion. And they just like no, they're doing what they want to do, and it doesn't matter what you say. They're doing what they want to do. And so different people will take on information in different ways and be influenced by different people in different ways. And it's a fascinating area because, yeah, how do we know what is the right decision for us based on living our best life? So there's a balance and an awareness, and it's really so deep. But it's just kind of, I would say, initially, usually for the first 30 years of most people's lives, is kind of a discovery of who we are, what we're doing, and then sort of almost from the age of sort of 30 or so onwards, we discover our skill set and our talents and the areas that we like to go into and get better at. And that's when we start listening to ourselves a little bit more rather than sort of the outside world. That's, for me, in my experience, where we're kind of when the change started happening, and even more so, I'd say now in the 40s, and it kind of strengthens itself. But then that leads to, if we're not taking on other perspectives, are we kind of just creating an echo chamber of what we want to hear? I know certain people who
Yeah.
read certain types of newspapers because it's that, left wing or right wing or whatever it might
Yeah.
be. Even myself, I read books that I want to read, that kind of resonate with me. I've deliberately stopped listening to a particular person who's got a YouTube channel, Impact Theory. It's amazing, but he's very left brain. It's all about discipline, putting off happiness until the future. Do this, do this, do this, and there's no sort of emotion to it. And I am an emotional person, and I want to feel, and I want to, all these other things. So I'm deliberately focusing on things that allow me to kind of create more of who I am and listen to things that relate to me rather than getting other people's perspectives. But am I limiting myself, Dave?
I think the echo chamber thing is something that we all, you talk about it like it's kind of something that only happens occasionally. I think we literally all live in an echo chamber, full stop.
Right.
I think that's just our lives. And I think that is the concept of our blinkered belief systems. Like we followed this. And I don't think it's necessarily bad, because that's the other thing. I do think echo chamber is a term that's used and for lots of negative connotation, like that being, you follow down that road and then you're stuck in that place.
Yeah.
I think an echo chamber can be used as a positive thing for a start. I think choosing to listen to someone in particular and someone else in particular and then block out other people creates a positive reinforcement echo chamber of becoming the person you want to be. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, to saying, I am looking to become that version of myself, whoever that might be. I'm inspired to be that kind of version of a human being. And so therefore I'm going to create my own very carefully crafted echo chamber that slowly reinforces the right beliefs and removes the wrong beliefs,
Yeah.
so that I can step up that ladder towards being that person. And I guess this is where the listening, the choice of who you listen to, the sources you listen to, and who you really take advice from is so important, because that is literally your route to changing the self, to transforming into the future version of yourself that you want to be. And I would say that also the faster, because I know I've talked a lot about the mentor or the person who's giving you advice having to listen to you and making sure that they're taking you into account, and you not just kind of taking things on faith and blindly. But actually there is another aspect of it, which is that we have to also be open and aware that we have so many subconscious hidden limiting beliefs and so many self-sabotage mechanisms going on individually that we're not aware of, and that someone else who hasn't got those problems, who's managed to go further than us and hasn't got those problems, may have a different way. There might be a leap of faith moment where you have to just say, I know something in this area is holding me back. I'm going to just take that person's advice, and I'm going to stop listening to myself in that area. And again, I think that's got to be, like you said earlier, committed to personally. You've got to make that choice for yourself. And you've got to say, I know I'm struggling here, and I know that person has a potential answer that looks that I'm inspired by them. They seem to have gotten through this problem themselves, and I'm therefore going to stop listening to that part of myself that keeps holding me back, and I'm going to try my best to replace it with their advice as a method of lifting me up that ladder towards who I want to become, where I want to get to in life. And there's no right answer of when you do that, for sure, because we're talking about things that are hidden to us individually, and that's part of the leap of faith of living a human life, right? That's part of just trying to do this thing as best we can.
Yeah, and I guess we've talked about wealth dynamics and the different styles of people and how they think, and you're very much more sort of on the left side, sort of the Lord, the detail person, and their dominant question in life is how. And so if you're always thinking about how do I do this, you'll be listening to people who are maybe ahead of you, and on the road that you want to go down, and you'll be reading books, and you'll be getting all the clarity that you want before necessarily making a decision. Whereas if I'm more on the right side, so if you ask me and I don't know the answer to something, I'll think, who do I know who is an expert in this field, and what book have I read, or what person do I know who's got the answer to this? I'll always be thinking of kind of the who's, and going to them to find the answers. So it's both research and people. I use sort of my network to find solutions to things, whereas some people will be listening to themselves, their internal dialogue, and others will be looking outside of themselves. But I think both are relevant. So I think when it comes to listening to people, listen to other people, do the research, and then listen to yourself. And we've done a previous podcast on listening to your heart rather than
how to listen to your heart. That's it.
Both are relevant.
Because I think that's where people, it's just being super clear that the moment you are feeling stuck is when potentially listening to yourself could be the wrong move. And the moment it's trying to open up to a different way of thinking, a different way of being, and just kind of more of the faith route. But as long as you're feeling open and feeling like things are flowing and things are going well, then definitely listening to yourself is the route. You're on the right road. It's open and flowing. But the stuckness is something I think people they're not so good at being aware of, and that therefore there might be some self-talk that's holding you back, some self-talk that's part of your belief system that you're having to let go of, and all of that, or just basically habitual emotional reactions that are causing you to be held and stuck. And that does, there is an element of, you've got to, like, I mean, I know I've got so many clients where I listen to them and I listen to them and I listen to them, and then we work together, but in the end I do have something that they're not comfortable with, and I'm going to advise it, and I'm going to ask them to do it, and I'm going to ask them to take on faith that I've been through where they are, and I know that this is a solution that will work, even if it's not something that they're right now comfortable doing, right? It doesn't fit their current necessary belief system in perfectly, but I've been there and I've been through it, and I know it's going to get them there. But I only do that having listened to them and having really understood the problem and then chosen the solution that I know got me from where they are to where I am now, rather than just having someone come to me and just going, you know what you need meditation, you need that right now, this and you need to do this meditation. And I never say that to any client. I'm like, even though I know meditation has been transformational for my life in every way, I'd never have a client sit down and before they even open their mouth go, you should be meditating. But I do know mentors who would do that.
Right.
And I've been there. I've sat in front of a mentor who would basically do that and say, before I say anything, are you meditating? You know? And it's like, and I know how transformational it is, but I'm never going to do that because there's some people who it depends how you approach meditation or what they need at that time. Is it meditation or is it something else to get them into it? Or, is it a different type of self-reflection method? It's just like, So I would say that.
So basically, in short, we need to listen to other people. We need to read other books and get the right sources of information and be deliberate about which sources of information we're getting, listening to effectively. But then at some point, we also need to then maybe go within and listen to ourselves, maybe listen to our heart, rather than trying to think it through in our head, as we discussed in the previous podcast. But at what point, Dave, should we kind of sort of stop the research and stop the listening and actually just start taking the action? Because some people would just go round and round and round. They'll learn stuff and never actually start, or they'll start and they'll stop and they'll self-sabotage, that they won't take the necessary action. At what point do we listen to ourselves? At what point do we start to take the action?
I know. I guess my answer to that on a base level is like action is continual. Like we're living in the now. We have the one moment of time that is continual moment, and you only move forwards by action, really. Some sort of action, even if that action is choosing inaction, such as choosing to sit down and self-reflect and not do something, or choosing to So the action is a continual motion that you I feel want to be always have some form of action moving, with the listening to keep informing how you pivot your action, your choices. So I think the moment someone, like I said earlier about, if you feel like you're stuck, that's when you know to listen to someone else, right? If you are listening and not taking action, that means you're stuck.
Right.
So you need to start taking action while you're doing it, and you need to there's only, if someone's giving you advice, if you're listening to people, they're never telling you to sit there and do nothing. They're always telling you you should be go buy to let. So do it like this. Go. They're giving advice on the action you should be taking. So be taking action. The action is a constant, and then the advice should be should be how do I pivot and tweak to make sure I'm keeping on the right path towards where I want to go.
Right. Yes, that makes sense. So always be taking action, and if you're not taking action, then you're stuck. So do something to unstick, get
unstick yourself. Yeah. So then, Dom, bring it like to us, right? Who do you listen to? How do you like deal with this in your life? Yeah, who do you listen to?
Who do I listen to? I was going to ask you the same question. Who do I listen to? So I mean, I as a lot of people know, I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and I read a fair amount too. My mum was a librarian. It's kind of almost in my blood that books and information is key. Who do I listen to? So I download a lot of books because I've read so much now. An awful lot of it, one is repetition, and two is sometimes I get a feel that it's sort of they're coming from a place that's not quite as advanced, maybe spiritually and emotionally, as I've got to. So I put down a lot of books these days because they're not resonating with me so much. And then I'm finding myself recently, certainly in the last couple of years, just going back to certain authors, certain people who have that depth of knowledge and wisdom that I just find so inspiring. So a couple of those people would be Dr. David Hawkins, which I think I've mentioned before, who created the Scale of Consciousness. He wrote the book Letting Go, the Pathway of Surrender, and various other books, which are really quite heavy and intellectual and deep, but you can kind of read them and just almost have to meditate on some of the sentences that they come out with. Eckhart Tolle, Robin Sharma is a fantastic author and has such great insights. I absolutely love his books. And yeah, more recently, the human design has been something that I've been reading about, and also about the unblocking stuff. That's what I've been reading about recently. So subconscious reprogramming, because actually what I've realized, having been 18 years in, business advice and coaching and mentoring and helping people to succeed, is that actually the biggest thing that's holding you back is not the lack of knowledge, it's those subconscious blocks. And when you can deal with those subconscious blocks, that's when you tend to get the step changes in business success. Yes, of course, you've got to know what to do. You've got to do the right marketing and everything else. But actually, the reason why you haven't been doing all those things is the subconscious limiting belief. So I've been reading a lot about that recently. No particular authors stand out at the moment, but those are some of the authors, Robin Sharma and David Hawkins in particular, and Eckhart Tolle. But also, I quite enjoy the Diary of CEO podcast and other podcast. One of them is called the Consultancy Business Podcast as well. I quite enjoy that one too. So various people. I love recommendations from others if they found something really interesting. So those are my sources. How about you? Who do you listen to apart from Jackie?
Just listen. Jackie's the only one I listen to. That is it. Can't have time for anyone else. Otherwise I'll get taken down over. No, it's funny. I like you. I mean, obviously, my evolution in the last few years has transformed much more towards personal development and personal evolution, spiritual evolution, that side. Just because I got to a point in business where I realized the thing holding my back was me, and that this was the thing that was causing me all my problems. It was stimulating my growth. It was making my life unhappy. So particularly for the last 4 years, that's where my focus has been. Because up until that point, I'd obviously been doing a lot of business listening and understanding business and reading books about business and how do you make the business work better, all of this. So I kind of had a fantastic foundation in business, but it was almost like I couldn't enact it all because I was in the way.
Yeah.
So for the last few years, again, same as you, it's obviously people who resonate with me, people who've got a lot of depth. And I do have that same feeling, but I'm a left-hand brainer, so I do like someone who's got a well-reasoned methodology, a well-reasoned argument for something. I like someone who's really given me some good evidence and some good back down. Joe Dispenza is one of my biggest that I go back to and listen to, just because what I love about his method is he shifts people's belief systems. He takes someone and it doesn't matter how stuck you are. Once you've listened to him for an hour, you're going to start shifting, in what you truly believe, and he will get you somewhere different. He might not get you all the way, but he will get you somewhere different. And so I occasionally like to listen to him because it just keeps bringing me back to a different way of thinking, different way of being. I listen to I do a lot of reading around spirituality at the moment. So there's a fantastic Paramahansa Yogananda who did the autobiography of a yogi, and I read a lot of his stuff. I'm not really a listener so much as a reader, so I guess I'm listening via their words,
right.
And that really does good for me. Michael Singer, I listen to Michael Singer when I'm walking around just doing background stuff. He's got a lot of audio stuff and again I find his approach to the world phenomenal, and I'm so inspired by the man because he has somehow managed to perfectly integrate unbelievable business success with unbelievable human spirituality and put it together in a way that it just sounds so magical. His approach to life, and I'm like, I'm inspired by that, and I want to be like that. So therefore, I will happily walk around when I'm going to the shops or something. I'll listen to something now. I will put on Michael Singer and listen to Tim, and he's got such a wonderful way of saying things, a great convincing attitude. But he's not some yogi sitting in a room somewhere just telling you very quietly, or you listen to some of these Buddhist people where Buddhist teachers, where it's very quiet, softly spoken. I get this vibe of somebody who walks around in a robe, kind of basically preaching. That's their job in life, not actually doing. Whereas Michael Singer, I get the vibe of somebody who's done it, who's doing it. He's running a business, he's running things, but he's doing it from this. Yes, the balance. So I'm inspired by that, and that's what I want to hear. So him as well. And back when I was listening to business people, I would choose businesses that inspired me. I haven't done that for a while now, but people like I would say the CEO of Disney. I think what he's done, and I'm not sure he is CEO anymore actually, but for about 20 years or so, he was CEO, and what he did with Disney was just unbelievable. I think it's all, when I've heard from him and listened to him, I find it all comes from an amazing way of being. And I think he, it's just incredible leaps of faith he's taken in his business, but done from such a good perspective. And I kind of want to want to see that in my own business. I want to be able to make those shifts in my own business. So I listen to him. The lady who runs Spanx, I can't remember the names at the moment because it's been quite a few years and the names don't stick with me, but the lady who runs Spanx, such a good energy, and she's done something so incredible in such a short time. And I think her marketing advice is insanely good. I think what she says about marketing is the type of person you just listen to say she's nailed it. So she's an expert. So to listen to that, I'm thinking about investing or kind of my money. I'm thinking I want to listen to Warren Buffett.
Yeah.
Because he's just the best in the world at it. He has proven himself to be, right? So I'm choosing people who inspire me. And actually, I love Warren Buffett's approach to life. It's not about the money for him. It's about doing something that fulfills him and doing it in a way that makes sense. And it's so successful, So that's the approach I take. But what I would say is I'm just mostly careful about not listening to people. And a big area right now when we're recording this, we've just had the election. And I know prior to election and even now, there are so many market predictions happening, and so much people saying, well, what do you think is going to happen? What's going to happen next? I couldn't care less about any of this. Of all the market predictions that are going to be out there, nearly 99.99% of them will be wrong. They're just all wrong. But what there will be, that all I will take on board is a general idea of what I think, what try and get a vibe for what is likely to happen. Just general, is the Bank of England base rate heading upwards or downwards? That's all I care about. Which way are we heading? Is it? Just so I can factor that into my planning when I'm doing refinances, should I wait a bit longer or not? It's just to give me some context for planning, but everything else I don't want to listen to. I've seen governments come in and out and not fulfill any of their promises. We just had the Rent Reform Act that just went 4 years of this is going to happen, that's going to happen, and then it didn't happen. And
starting again from zero.
Stop listening to that stuff because you keep bringing it in and trying to make decisions on it, and it's just not. Most of it's not helpful, and it's actually just blocking your headspace. It's build up of crap that is holding you back from making clear brain decisions. So that I'm much more about being careful about what I not listen to rather than and the stuff I do listen to is about like the resonance and
that's a nice way to conclude, actually. So be deliberate about the things that you want to listen to and be informed that but by following the right people for you and who you're interested in, who inspires you ideally, but then also be very deliberate about who you don't listen to, and also in particular, but not listening to stuff that's extreme, because that's just there to grab your attention, the news and things like that. It's not, predictions about a big market crash and everything else. It doesn't generally happen that fast. Things happen relatively slowly on the whole, not always, but on the whole. So that's a good way to conclude is craft who you're listening to.
Thank you so much for joining us on another episode of the Property Lifestyle Mastery podcast. This time next week, we have got a special guest on the show. We've got Julie Talbot joining us, and she's going to be talking about building a property business and travelling the world. Sounds familiar, right? But the thing that Julie is doing that is different to what Dave and I are doing is that she's also doing it whilst raising a family. So an absolutely beautiful and amazing human being will be joining us next week and giving her perspective on how to do this property thing whilst travelling the world and raising little ones at the same time. So going to be a wonderful episode. So until then, have a fantastic week ahead and loads of love.